There's plenty of change going around with the Arizona Wildcats program from a new conference to a new coaching staff. It's going to be an interesting 2024 season, and I'm excited to see what Brent Brennan and that staff can do in this new conference, in their new start, their new beginning. So let's dive in to the Arizona Wildcats. But before we do that, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Make sure you like the video, share the video. It goes a long way in helping this channel. This channel has grown significantly since starting the deep dive series. It's been really fun to see. I appreciate every single one of you for what you have done for me and for this channel. This has been really fun. I love hearing from all of you, and we're not done yet. We have over 20 deep dive videos coming out, so make sure you don't miss out on that fun leading into the 2024 season. Let's dive into Arizona, and Brent Brennan is one of those coaches. When you look at, I don't think a lot of people pay attention to him because of where he came from. San Jose State wasn't a team that most people paid attention to. Now, with the college football video game coming out, I think that more people will pay attention to San Jose State because that's a team that they're going to try to rebuild. But Brent Brennan did a great job at a program that most people overlooked and was kind of at the bottom of the Mountain West, to be honest. This is a program that wasn't winning a ton of football games before Brent Brennan came along. Obviously, when you go back to the 2012 season is probably the one that everyone remembers, but I think even most people don't remember that. So Brent Brennan did such a good job, and a promotion was well deserved. Going to Arizona was kind of a surprise. No one really expected Jed Fish to depart, but you see what Brent Brennan was capable of doing, and he kind of takes over. I wouldn't say a similar situation because Arizona is definitely in a better place than San Jose State was. But it's going to be fun to see what he can do to rebuild that program a little bit and almost keep the success going as well. He brings in Dino Babers to run the offense. I thought that was a great addition for this team. That's a guy who knows how to coach an offense, how to make explosive plays happen and scheme things up. So he's going to be really fun to watch on that side of the football. The defense is going to be fun as well. Dwayne Aquina is coming to call the plays on the defense coming back. And I think that what they have coming back is a defense that's very opportunistic. Last year, I just rewatched the Alamo Bowl, and obviously that's probably an outlier more than anything. But the turnovers that Arizona created, that was a group that was very intentional about getting the football out and making reads. And they have some really good players that are coming back that made big contributions in that game. So it'll be fun to see how those guys are able to take a full year of experience or that experience in the bowl game and transition that to 2024. And Brent Brennan's staff has a good start on things, and it's going to be fun to see what they can do to capitalize on some of that talent they have returning. Now, this group also went into the transfer portal. There's plenty of talent that departed, whether that was to the NFL, to graduation, but also the transfer portal. Now, the transfer portal was probably didn't lose as much as maybe you thought they would, but there were still plenty of departures that require some replacements. Jonah Coleman's going to be one of those guys that's a solid running back that you lose there. You lose Ephesians Prysock at the cornerback position, Demon Williams at quarterback. Now, obviously, Williams wasn't a starter, but there are some players that are going to be missed. But I do think this group, this staff, did a great job of bringing in talent to make sure that that's not going to be a huge issue. You bring in certain players from San Jose State that follow Brennan and his staff, Trey Smith, Wally Conley, and Sam Olson on two on the defensive or one on the defensive side of the ball, two on the offensive side of the ball. That's going to be a solid group to come in and kind of bring in what Brennan wants to do and help you guys get acclimated to that. Kevin Darton is going to be a guy that is underrated at defensive tackle. And Corey Krosky Merritt, a underrated running back as well. So this is a staff that did a good job of identifying needs, but also getting players from the transfer portal to fill those needs. And some very underrated players. We'll dive more into some of those guys a little bit later. But let's start into the offense. This is the group that most people are excited to see, and it's easy to see why. Noah Fifita decides to come back. I think that he was, and we're going to talk about Tetairoa and McMillan, but Fifita and McMillan were two of the bigger targets in the transfer portal. that if they were going to go in the transfer portal, they ultimately decide to stay at Arizona, which probably I would love to hear the behind the scenes conversations as to how that went, how that played out. But this is a group that I think is going to be excited to have those two back because of their consistency, their connection from high school, and their connection with Arizona. Fifita is a little bit on the undersized sort of place in college football, 5'11", 194 pounds, but he is an absolute joy to watch. He is electric when he is playing well, someone who is not afraid to take shots downfield. And it's easy to see why when you have the pass catchers that he did, and with McMillan coming back, that obviously makes things a lot easier. But Noah Fifita by himself is really fun to watch. Kind of that underdog role, if you will, at Arizona because most people didn't really want him. And he lands at Arizona, takes over the starting job, and does not look back. Threw for nearly 2,900 yards and 25 touchdowns last year. A really fun player to watch, a guy that's easy to root for, and someone who is not afraid to take deep shots. That's the one thing I really loved about Fifita, specifically in that Alamo game. I think that he was someone who is ready to let everything hang and air everything out to try and help his team win. And that's going to be something that's really fun to watch in this Big 12. This is an Arizona team, keep in mind, that expects to compete for a Big 12 championship. I don't know if that's going to happen. We're obviously going to dive into that today, but Noah Fifita is going to play a big role. I'd like to see him stay healthy because the talent behind him is there. It's just very limited in terms of experience. You have Braden Dorman, a redshirt freshman who's coming back. Adam DeMonte, an NAU transfer, Northern Arizona, comes in as a sophomore. So you have players behind him, but there's nobody that's proven. There's nobody that's really experienced, and it's a young group. So Noah Fifita has to stay healthy if Arizona wants to ultimately achieve that goal. I think Fifita also needs to take a step forward as a passer. I think that he can produce more and be more explosive now that he can get a full year of being the quarterback. And that's going to be fun to watch. I love the opportunities that are presented to him. And this will be a really fun team to pay attention to in 2024. The running back position is going to look very different than it was last year. You are bringing in a couple of new faces to take over the running back room compared to last year. You look at guys that they've had in the past. You have Mike Wiley. We talked about Jonah Coleman. They're both gone. Now you bring in a guy like Paulie Conley, who was just at the FCS level 2 years ago, went to San Jose State, now finds himself in the Big 12 and competing for a starting spot. Your Corey Krosky Merritt comes from New Mexico. He is someone who is a big time playmaker for the Lobos, which says a lot because New Mexico is not exactly a team that is winning a ton of football games. So the fact that he rushed for over 1,100 yards and 17 touchdowns speaks a lot to his success and what he's capable of doing. Conley and Krosky Merritt could be a very fun duo in the backfield. And I think Brendan did a great job of identifying, well, first, both Mountain West talent, but underrated talent that's going to take a step forward and be really fun to watch in the Big 12. You also have some solid depth pieces that are going to be interesting to watch. Rayshon Luke had 153 yards and a touchdown last year. And Hedrick Briscano comes in from Ole Miss. He is someone that's going to be a participant in that rotation. We'll see how much he can contribute because this is a group that finished 86th running the football. That is something that needs to improve if you want to have a more balanced offense, although the passing the ball was a pretty good option. But when you look at what the wide receivers, the pass catchers bring back, the running attack might need to be a more prominent role or prominent player, I should say, early in the season. Because while they do have Tetairoa McMillan coming back, everyone else needs to prove themselves. There's not really a Jacob Cowing. There's not a Dorian Singer from a couple of years ago. You don't have someone that you know for sure is going to help McMillan. You have plenty of options, but nobody that's really proven that's going to step up quite yet. Now McMillan's an absolute stud, going to make millions in the NFL when he ultimately decides to go there. 6'5", 215 pounds, had over 1,400 yards and 10 touchdowns last year. McMillan is absolutely phenomenal downfield. He's a legitimate deep threat, has a great catch radius, great acrobatic catches. he is someone who's really fun to watch and gives you more room for error if you are a quarterback, which makes things really interesting for Fifita because he's kind of one of those players that's going to take a risk here and there. He's going to take a shot and he's going to throw the ball up. And most of the time, when you throw it into Tetairoa and McMillan space, you're going to have a reception. He's going to win most of those one-on-one battles, love 50-50 balls, and that's really exciting. He's so fun to watch. If you have not watched him yet, he is probably the one wide receiver that I would recommend the most to go back and watch his film. He is electric. He is the definition of a first round pick, someone who's going to make a ton of money in the NFL because of what we've seen. And he is going to be a big reason why Arizona continues to throw the football a lot. That being said, somebody else needs to step up and play a more prominent role and be the complement to McMillan's game. Montana Lamonius Craig is back after 296 yards and 3 touchdowns, has pretty good size at 6'2", 200 pounds. So he is someone that could play a bigger role, definitely has plenty of speed to go with his size. So he is someone who could step up and do exactly what Arizona needs him to do. Malachi Riley, also a solid player, 6'2", 180 pounds, only had 90 yards though last year. So now he gets an opportunity to show what he's capable of doing. You also have Romello Murphy, you have AJ Jones, Devin Hyatt. You have plenty of options behind Tetairoa McMillan, but someone has to step up. Somebody has to be that pass catcher that is going to take some pressure away from McMillan because teams are going to send multiple players towards McMillan. That is a given. This coaching staff knows that teams are going to bracket him. They're going to double him. They are going to do whatever they can to make sure that Tetairoa McMillan does not beat them. They are going to find ways to scheme against him and force everyone else to win. That leaves a lot of pressure on these guys, but that also leaves a lot of favorable matchups. Lamonius Craig is someone who can win those one-on-one battles. Malachi Riley has the talent to do the exact same thing. So these are guys that are capable of doing what this team needs them to do. We just need to see it first. The tight end position could play a more prominent role as well. When you look at what San Jose State did last year, Sam Olsen didn't have the best stats, but he definitely was a key player in that offense. So the tight end position could be more valuable this year. We'll see about that. But Sam Olsen can play that role. Kayan Burnett, you have options again, but who's going to step up? Roberto Miranda is another guy. Again, nobody has a ton of production, but you have guys that could play bigger roles for this offense. That's going to be something that needs to happen. The passing attack needs to be a key player once again. If the rushing attack can hold things over until the new guy emerges aside McMillan, that's going to be huge. So this offense has plenty of players that can make things happen. And they also have an offensive line that's going to play a big role and be fairly successful as well. We'll talk about that group here because when you look at this group, you have some experienced players. I think when you look at guys like Wendell Moe, Josh Baker, and Jonas Savainia, you're looking at three guys that have the experience that know what it takes to compete at a high level. Now, granted, they're going into a new conference. You're going to face different competition. You have to get adjusted to what these new teams look like. This is a team that it's one of the few teams that goes into a new conference and has to learn all pretty much all different teams. You have to learn who's on what team, what do they run, what do they like to do. It's not the Pac-12 anymore. Going into a new conference can seem fun, but there's also a lot of work that comes with it. The offensive line, I think, has a lot of that work to figure out. Who is going to be good, who's going to be able to take over, but having that trio back of veterans is huge. Raymond Polito comes in at the left tackle position. He is someone who is going to play a more prominent role this year. 5 starts under his belt so far. Pretty good size at 6'6", 335. So the tackles are going to have solid size. The offensive line overall has pretty good size. Polito is at 335. Savainia is at 330, and Mo comes in at 340. So you don't have any concerns about their ability to handle life in the trenches. Leif Magnuson is going to take on a bigger role as well. 20 games under his belt with only 5 starts. So now he gets put into a bigger, a more prominent role. And again, this offensive line has a lot of pressure to produce. Behind those guys, you don't have a ton of experience. You have two redshirt freshmen on the left side. You have a sophomore behind Josh Baker, and then you have two transfers on the right side with a total of 8 games of experience. So this is a group that is going to have to grow and grow up in a hurry. One injury could thrust someone else that doesn't have a ton of experience into the starting role. We've seen that in the past. Polito and Magnuson are evident of that. So there's plenty of options for them. It's just a matter of who's going to be experienced and who can handle that experience. Again, going into the Big 12 might seem like really fun, but there is going to be some challenges presented with that. And unfortunately, the offensive line is going to have to take on a lot of that. They are such an important group, as is any offensive line, but this is a group that has a lot of pressure coming their way. But I do like the experience they have coming back. They just need to mature a little bit faster than maybe some of these other teams. The defense is really where they need to improve. Now, this was a group, like I said, was very opportunistic, a group that understood how to get the football back to their offense. And that was a big reason for their success. We've seen some of these underdog teams that are very explosive offensively, but don't necessarily have the best defenses. That being said, there's a lot of defenses that have figured out we don't necessarily need to stop teams super consistently. We just need to find ways to create turnovers to get the ball back to our offense. We may give up 30 points a game, but the 2 to 3 turnovers that we create gives us an additional 10 plus points, which is enough for us to win comfortably because we have an offense that can score. That being said, this year feels like it's going to be a little bit different. They don't necessarily have the same offense coming back. They have plenty of explosive weapons, but they're going to have to figure out how they can get the football back or to be able to slow down opposing offenses. That being said, there were certain aspects of Arizona's defense that I really like. The defensive line, I think, plays a big role in being able to stop the run, just like they did last year. They finished 27th against the run. They were also 30th in points per game. So there were definitely things that they did really well. They just lose some pieces that need to be replaced. Trey Smith comes in from San Jose State. I don't think Trey Smith gets nearly enough love that he deserves. He is a very productive player. You saw that at San Jose State last year. 6'5", 255 pounds, 9.5 tackles for loss, 6.5 sacks. He is someone that can step in right away and be productive and be disruptive for this defense. Opposite of him, you have another Uiagalelei, the cousin of DJ Uiagalelei. Itai is coming in to play a more prominent role. Was a pretty solid player for Arizona last year. Now gets to be the starter opposite of Trey Smith. That is an underrated duo that I don't think is going to get the love that they deserve. That's kind of the theme with Arizona. They have a lot of underrated talent, underappreciated talent, and that's going to be really fun to watch. It's a lot of new faces, though. You have Trey Smith coming in. Uiagalelei is back after a solid year with Arizona. You have Keanu Moloto that is going to return as well. So you have some players coming back, but then you have mostly new faces. So that's going to be a very interesting aspect of this defense. Is the defensive line is going to look very, very new. Kevon Darton comes in from Syracuse, 42 tackles, 8 tackles for loss. He is an underrated player at the defensive tackle position. Very quick, even though he's undersized. I think that he's going to be really fun to watch in the Big 12. Behind them, you have 4 transfers. You have Lance Kennelly coming in from Stanford, 35 tackles last year. You have plenty of options at various different levels. You bring in some Pac-12 talent to back up some of these guys. Chase Kennedy is a very interesting player coming from Utah, someone who doesn't have a lot of production, but this staff really likes the talent level that they're getting in him. So you have a defensive line that is expected to be still really solid and be a group that can disrupt things and take away certain aspects of opposing offenses. But you have to find ways to gel. This is a brand new, like I said, of the 8 guys that are on this screen right now, 6 of them are new. So that's going to require some time to get things transferred over. You also have Chuba Mae coming in from the FCS level. So you have to learn a new level of football. Trey Smith is coming from the group of 5. I'm not going to say that it's this massive gap between those two, but this is still a transition for some of those guys, and they have to find ways to get adjusted to that. But that being said, the talent level leads me to believe that that shouldn't be too much of a problem. And if not, the linebackers behind them should be able to handle anything that's thrown their way. Justin Flo and Jacob Manu come back after pretty big seasons. Now, Flo is going to have to step up probably a little bit more now that teams know what Manu is capable of doing. 116 tackles for Manu and 9.5 tackles for loss. He is someone who is everywhere. Again, when I was watching the Alamo Bowl, Manu in number 5, he was everywhere. He was making plays left and right. He was also talking a ton of trash, which was great to see. The confidence in which he plays. He is someone who is not shy about his game, not shy about helping his teammates and supporting his teammates. He's a great player to have. Justin Flo, when healthy, Justin Flo is one of the more terrifying players in college football. 6'2", 225 pounds, someone who can be an absolute heat-seeking missile. I just really want to see him stay healthy this year. If he can stay healthy, you're looking at a defense that should be a really fun defense to watch in terms of talent. Behind them, that's kind of where things get a little bit concerning in terms of depth. Tay Brown is back. The coaching staff expects him to play more of a prominent role in the rotation, could actually compete with Justin Flo for that starting spot. You have a few other options behind them. Kemuela Kaiahu is going to be an interesting player to watch. 15 tackles last year, so we're not really sure what we're going to get from him. And then you have two redshirt players behind those two guys. Leviticus Sua is a redshirt freshman that could play more of a prominent role if he can find ways to one gain the confidence, and also now he's got that redshirt year. Now he has more experience. Can he transition that to the field? You also have Brandon Craddock, a redshirt sophomore who has some experience, but again, the inexperience of the linebacker group could be concerning, but also at the same time, this is a group that expects to be a really fun group in 2024, and a group that could have a massive impact on the success of this team. Because again, the offense should be explosive. The defense just has to do its part. And the front 7, front 6 actually has some work to do, but you also feel pretty good about where they're at. You also feel really good about the secondary. The secondary has been talked about for a little while, and I mentioned it earlier in the video. This is a group that thrived in the Alamo Bowl against Oklahoma. This is a group that was playing fast. They were creating turnovers, and they were doing a lot of really good things. They played really well together, and it was really fun to watch. The name that everybody is talking about is Tetairoa Davis, and how could you not? 6'4", 195 pounds. People are talking about him as a potential first-round pick. He is someone who has a bright future ahead of him, and it's easy to see why. He has the size, the length, he has everything that you need in a first round talent, and someone who has a bright future. Like I said, he is going to be the leader of this group, somebody who is going to help a group that finished 91st against the pass. Again, this is a group that when you look at some of the numbers, you probably think, hey, the secondary wasn't really that good. But when you look at their turnovers they created, this was a really fun part of the defense to watch, and that should be the case once again. You bring in Marquise Groves Killebrew in to play the safety position, one of the safety positions, I should say. He is going to be someone that is going to be really fun to watch, and he is someone that could have a really prominent role for this defense. Again, this is a defense, especially in the secondary, that takes over and takes the ball away from opposing offenses. So, and excuse me, he's going to play the other cornerback position. He is someone that could have a major impact, relatively inexperienced, but when you're playing opposite of Tetairoa Davis, teams are going to test you. That is going to be a given. You do not get a break when Tetairoa Davis is the other corner. They are going to test him. Now, if he can't handle it or if he needs a break, you have other guys. You have Emmanuel Carnley that could step in, Jono Price, and Demetrius Freeney, who come in for the College of San Mateo. Those are two guys that are probably a little bit underrated right now, but definitely capable of making big plays if they're able to handle that transition. The other returning starters, Braden Stukes comes in back. He's going to play the star position, 55 tackles, 4 tackles for loss. Good size again at 6'2", 195 pounds. So I think that they have plenty of talented players. They have good size at certain positions. It's just a matter of, again, can you create those turnovers and can you find ways to get the offense back to football? The safeties are really fun to watch. And also probably two of the more slept on safeties in college football. Dalton Johnson and Gunnar Maldonado. Those are two guys that when you go back again, I referenced the Alamo Bowl. I know it's one game, but it was so fun to watch. Those two play with such good speed and such good pace. They understand the urgency of games. They understand how to take away the football. And even if they're not taking away the football, they understand how to set up their teammates for better positions and better plays. Those are two guys that are great to have back. And again, two of the more underrated safeties in college football. Those are guys that are not going to get a ton of attention, but they deserve more love than they're getting. And it's going to be fun to see what they can do in the Big 12 because I think that this group could create more turnovers once again because of the starters that they have coming back. When we talk about the Big 12, everything goes to the schedule, and this is going to dictate if this team is a championship contender. And right now, the over under for this team is 8 wins, which says that this should be a good group once again in 2024. Now, when you look at the schedule, the first two games, you should be 2-0. There shouldn't be any debate about that. New Mexico, while they should be better, that should not be a team that gives them any difficulty. That being said, at the beginning of the year, there might be some growing pains. So maybe that game is a little closer, but then you get Northern Arizona. Either way, that should be a 2-0 start. But this is where we're going to find out real quick if this is a contender or not, because you play the other two teams that most people consider the best two teams in the Big 12. And both of those games, unfortunately, are on the road at Kansas State and at Utah. That's not a very kind way to start your Big 12 debut, but you're also getting an opportunity to say, we are going to be that team. We are going to take over and we are going to find ways to win football games. Now, if you somehow magically end up 4-0, your reward is to get Texas Tech at home. That's another team that could surprise people. BYU is not as much of a concern. It is on the road, though. The thing with the Big 12 is that some of these teams may not seem like they're too daunting, but the fact that you have to go to certain places makes it a little bit more interesting. BYU is trying to get that bad taste out of their mouth from their first year in the Big 12. So that's a group that could be plenty motivated for that Arizona team. Colorado is a very interesting. That's a volatile team that could have an interesting year. They could be really good. They could also be imploding at this point. We don't really know. West Virginia at home is a better place to play West Virginia than on the road in Morgantown. That's going to be an interesting game as well. Again, their Big 12 is so full of really interesting opportunities. At UCF, that's going to be tough. UCF's another team that expects to compete for a conference championship. I think there's, 8 teams that are ready to compete for that title. Arizona is one of them, and they face a lot of the other teams. So we're going to find out pretty quick if Arizona is indeed a contender or if they are not. Houston should be a relatively easy game. At TCU after that is a potentially tough game depending on what TCU looks like. And Arizona State at home, it's a rivalry game. So this schedule, the over-under is 8, but so to me, if everything's going right, this is a 10-2 team, a team that competes for a conference championship. I just don't see this team going over 10 wins just because of what we talked about before. There are a few things that need to get sorted out. I think that they for sure lose one of the Kansas State Utah games because those two are on the road and because those two teams are so good. That's probably going to result in at least one loss. That being said, they can also, if they get hot and they figure things out, this is a team that can definitely win 10 games. The floor to me is 6-6. I think that a new coaching staff's coming in. Yes, you have a good quarterback and a good wide receiver, but what other proven talent do you have right now? The answer right now is not much, but there's talent there to work with. So the floor to me has to be 6-6. I think there's a big range of what this team could do, and I hope it's more towards the ceiling than the floor, but you just never know. The Big 12 also presents plenty of challenges that we will see if this team is ready for. But either way, Brent Brennan is such a fun coach. I think that he is in a good position with Arizona. This is still going to be a really fun team to watch, and we will find out pretty quickly if Arizona is indeed a contender or not.